After this story of John the Baptist being beheaded, we now have the disciples coming back to him and going into a deserted place. And this is kind of exciting because now, finally, the Gospel of John picks back up. The beginning of chapter 6. So now I have all four Gospels to try and fit together. This is going to be work. There's also a bit of a problem because the reason why they all go into a deserted place is a bit different in Matthew than it is from the other three. Well, it is from Mark and Luke. John just says, after these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. So he went over the sea, doesn't exactly say where, to a place. The others say a deserted place. So I guess that's just where they're going. But it doesn't say exactly what happened. It just says after these things. Matthew says, when Jesus heard of it, he departed from there by ship into a desert place. And no mention of the disciples at all. This is right after the last verse. John the Baptist's disciples buried John's body and went and told Jesus. Then, when Jesus heard of it, he departed from there by ship into a desert place. So it seems that Jesus heard of John the Baptist, so he decided, because of that, to go into solitary. But Luke and Mark say it differently. Luke says, and the apostles, when they were returned, told him all that they had done, and he took them and went aside privately into a desert place belonging to the city called Bethsaida. Mark is even more clear. It has Jesus actually saying that. And the apostles gathered themselves together to Jesus and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. And he said to them, come you yourselves apart into a desert place and rest a while. For there were many coming and going, and they had no leisure so much as to eat. And they departed into a desert place by ship privately. Matthew is the only one that would lead us to believe, because of Jesus hearing of John the Baptist being dead, he went into a desert place. All the others, well, John is ambiguous. Nothing is said in John after these things. Mark and Luke both clearly say the disciples come back, they tell Jesus about what they did, then Jesus takes them apart into a deserted place. Now, I don't exactly know how to reconcile that. So, I took a look at the Chronological Gospels and Michael Rood, and what he did was in Matthew 14:13, where it says, when Jesus heard of it, he does something creative. Of it is in italics, meaning it's a translator entry. So what he does is he just takes that out and puts in brackets that the disciples returned. So it seems to be implied from Matthew 14:13 that Jesus, when he heard of John the Baptist's death, that's when he left, and that Michael Rood changes that. But there's an explanation for it, and that is because Mark and Luke say the disciples come back and then Jesus says to go. And if that is possible, if that happened, then maybe you could say when Jesus heard of them returning, or when Jesus heard of what they told him, then he left. So this does actually seem to be Matthew versus Mark and Luke. John doesn't really help. He just says after these things. It is clear that when they go into a deserted place, the disciples are there. Mark says, they depart into a desert place privately, and the people saw them departing, the group departing. And many knew him and ran afoot there out of all cities, and outwent them, and came together to him. And Jesus, when he came out, saw many people and was moved with compassion, and that's when he feeds them, 5,000 people with bread and fish. But he does it with the help of his disciples. He has his disciples handing out all this food, so his disciples are there in the deserted place. Maybe I could say that Jesus heard of it, he departed into a desert place, and then fit before, when the people had heard thereof, they followed him. The fact that the disciples showed up and then they go to another deserted place, and that's where all the other people come there. But that seems a bit more of a stretch than just to say Jesus heard not of John, but of what the disciples said, and then left. So I think that's the best answer. That's what I'm going to go with. I'll save when Jesus heard of it from Matthew for after Mark and Luke. And even after John, I'll put after these things, and then the disciples show up. Actually, yeah, that's where I'll start. I'll start with John. After these things. This is exciting. I haven't had anything from John in literally weeks. It's taken me that long to get through all these other events. Blue. After these things. Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, but not going to say that yet. After these things, the disciples came back. Luke has, and the disciples, when they were returned, told him all that they had done. And that's it. Then he takes them aside privately. So before he takes them aside, all the events of the disciples coming to him and saying what they said, that's what I'm going to put now. Mark is way more descriptive, as usual. And the apostles gathered themselves together to Jesus, and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. So a few more lines. They both begin with, and the disciples gathered. But because I have after these things from John, I'm going to not put and. After these things, I'm just going to go right into the apostles. After these things, or I could put and after these things. No, there's already plenty of ands in the Bible. So I'm just going to leave those out. Luke says, when they were returned. You know what? I know how to put these two together. The apostles, when they returned. And from Mark, the apostles gathered themselves together. I'm going to say, after these things, when the apostles returned, after these things, when the apostles returned, the apostles is both Mark and Luke, were returned, then I can say, and gathered themselves together, they told him all that they had done. Actually, no, I'm going to leave out that and. When the apostles were returned, they gathered themselves to Jesus and told him all things. That's how it has to be. Okay. Were returned. Now they, also from Luke, Mark, gathered themselves together to Jesus. And told him all things. Luke just has told him all that they had done. So I'm going to leave out that from Luke. Just go right into what, or no, right into they had done. So, and told him, and is Mark only. And told him all is both. Mark is things. I could say all things that they had done. Or I could say all things both what they had done and all things that they had done and what they had taught. All things that they had done. Oh, I can have both. All things that they had done. Both what they had. No, okay, I can't have all, and then when explaining both, the first one would be exactly what we said before. I want to have that they had done instead of both what they had done and what they had taught. All things that they had done and what they had taught. Yeah. So that is from Luke only. They had done is both. They had done. That's just the end in Luke. Mark has and what they had taught, so I'm going to finish with Mark and what they had taught.